Hi there, and welcome to the Homestead Education Podcast. Do you have a homestead, farm, or just dream of a rural life? This is a show to help you and your kids grow your own food and grow as a person. I'm your host, Kody Hanner. I'm a homesteader, homeschool mom of 6, and small town enthusiast. I was raised by an old school rancher and blessed by the grace of God to have been exposed to so much of what rural life has to offer. Join me every week to talk about homesteading, homeschooling, and growth with a Homestead Education. All right, everyone. I have Liz Haselmayer on today. She's the creator and founder of Homegrown Education, a company empowering families to embrace real food. Liz has written several real food educational resources, including nutrition curricula for children, a 6-week dinner plan, and most recently, a nourishing breakfast cookbook. Liz also hosts a weekly podcast with her husband and homeschools their 3 daughters in their suburban Ohio home. Hi, Liz.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So I've been so excited to talk to you because food is such a big conversation in the homestead world.
Yes, it is.
So do you want to tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. So, I think it's even funny I'm on this podcast because like 5 years ago, I would have never imagined that I would have this company built around real food. It's been such a natural progression in my life, but also at the same time, looking back, it totally makes sense why I'm here. But I've always had a really complicated relationship with food in high school and middle school. I had a really debilitating eating disorder, and I was a 90s baby. Like I grew up on the classic packaged processed foods.
Yep.
My parents were, very typical middle class Americans, and we just ate that way. And I think most people in that time frame ate that way. I also was blessed, to have grown up in the era of like the early 2000s where like hyper thin was in, right? The model
Yeah.
thin was like this beautiful thing to aspire to be. And, I succumbed to that. I fell prey to that. And I think a lot of people my age did. And so I had a not so great relationship with food all the way up to having a full-blown eating disorder. And I didn't really find food freedom until I started educating myself on food itself. So even though I went to an inpatient treatment facility at the age of 17 and, lived in Arizona for 3 months during that time when I was still in high school, and then came home to a group of dietitians and therapists and all that, I didn't leave there with an understanding of real food. I left there with the basic clinical understanding of an eating disorder. But I didn't find food freedom until I found folks like the Weston A. Price Foundation and like folks who, honestly, in the homesteading community, who are connected to nature, who understand the source of their food. And, it's been a really beautiful progression because as I've gotten closer to the foods we eat, I realize how I can avoid some of those confusing topics with my own kids. And so I have 3 daughters, and I want to do everything in my power to set them up with the most robust food education and food appreciation and respect, and have an open dialogue around that because I don't want them falling into the same traps that I fell into. And I just saw a news article like circulating social media where it was like the heroin chic look is back, right? Where we had this like moment in time where we were really empowering women with more curves and more muscle tone, and now like we're back because Khloe Kardashian is now super thin, and I'm just like, I reject that. I will not.
Yes.
For my and, it honestly brings up an awesome opportunity to have that conversation with them. My oldest is 11. And while I might not use the term heroin chic with her, because that will open a whole other can of worms, we can talk about these body image issues and these results of these cultural norms. And so that's kind of where my heart and my passion comes into it. I live in the suburbs, right? So I'm not a homesteader. There are so many amazing ways to be close to your food, even if you do live in the suburbs or the city. And so I think that's kind of the critical role my family and my husband and I play in this real food space, is just an example of a family living in the suburbs wanting to be close to our food. And we are a hunting family, so we have that aspect. We do process our own venison and cook from scratch and source our dairy from a local farm and all of those pieces. But we aren't the same huge chicken coop and garden in the backyard as a lot of people we see on the internet, which is fine. I think we all have a space or a place in this space.
I really feel like the modern homestead movement is more about self-sufficiency and less about what you're able to grow in your yard. So thank you so much for sharing that vulnerability with us about how you had your struggles with food. And that's actually something I wanted to talk about first is in one of your podcasts, you talked about everybody has a catalyst to their natural eating and how we start down that path. Was yours this, or was there an aha moment?
You know, mine, like so many people, came from, I would call it a health crisis. And it wasn't my own health crisis. It was actually my middle daughter's. She was born, so she was born with a pretty typical birth defect called bilateral clubbed feet. It's just where their feet are pretty misty and it looks like a golf club. It's like the most ridiculous diagnostic term, but she was born with clubbed feet. And, when we were delivered that news at our 20-week ultrasound, my OBGYN at the time was very flippant and uneducated, and she didn't know anything. And she
That's
was
hard.
like, yeah. And she goes, not only were they like, oh, it's a girl, they didn't even like tell us that they were going to announce the gender. But then they go, yeah, everything looks great, except it looks like she's got a birth defect and, she might not be able to walk. And we were like,
What a scary, yeah.
scary. And so they basically said, we can't tell you anything because, once baby is born, then it's the pediatrician's like job to inform you on all things life. So I had to like track down a pediatrician and try to call them out of office hours, and they didn't answer. And so I had to sit with this news for like 24 hours of, oh my gosh, what is clubbed feet? And then Googling everything. And then there's so many things that are associated with bilateral clubbed feet that like she could have all these other issues and it could be a cascading thing. Turns out, yes, she had clubbed feet at birth. She got braces and she was casted from her hips down for the first 5 or 6 months of life, but like very correctable, very reversible. And she's beautiful and healthy and can walk and run and do all the things today. But
I'm happy to hear that. We had something similar with our 2.5-year-old where they're like, oh, his spinal tube or whatever at 13 weeks was large, so that he was either going to be Down syndrome or have a heart defect. And they're like, let's do a blood test to confirm that. But I was on blood thinners, so it took 3 blood tests to be able to get enough information. So like this, they told us this at 13 weeks. We were 25 weeks when we got the confirmation that he was okay. So, I mean, it was just a disaster. Like, I mean, I was like I'm going to accept this and we'll accept whatever comes with him. And I mean, so was my husband, but he was like, he can't handle that type of information. So like, no matter how much education I threw at him, it like wasn't helping. So it was a stressful time.
Yeah, I agree. I think my husband too really struggled with it. And, as much as I'm so thankful for the modern medical system in times of like urgent care, like a car crash, OBGYN side really, really failed me for multiple of my pregnancies. And so, I hate to say that, but it just sometimes the diagnostic efforts go a little bit too far. And for us, it just wasn't helpful information. So anyway, she turned out being just fine. But we did have several things with her where, I was breastfeeding, but then I had to go back to work full time. So then I was like, okay, I need to switch to formula. And it was really in that time period with terrible eczema, terrible digestive issues. I already have this baby that has these poor casts from her hip down to her toes. Like she's so clanky when I pick her up.
Aww.
I just was like, oh, she's not thriving. And I actually found the Weston A. Price homemade infant baby formula, which you want to talk about an interesting way to get into the real food space. It's trying to feed your kids raw milk. The internet will tell you just atrocities. So, so scary, right? You're so afraid of real living food. And
I was a food safety specialist for 5 years, and raw milk was like the devil. So
so you understand. So imagine me, I'm just trying to get on this path of, living a little bit more holistically. I feel like with each kid, I kind of took 5 steps further. My last baby was a beautiful home birth, unmedicated, and it was an awesome experience. But like
how
so many,
special.
yeah, so many things in between there. I was just still relearning. And like I said, my experience in eating disorder treatment facilities and with dietitians taught me, unfortunately, literally nothing about food, like nothing about food.
No.
And so it was when I dug into the topic of raw milk, which is why I love it so much. It's why we just published a raw milk guide, because I love the topic.
I saw that. I downloaded it last night and I was reading it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's free. Anyone can go grab it, because I was like, I don't need to be gatekeeper for this information. Everyone needs to understand milk through perspective. But milk is such a good example in the US of a food where regulation has just changed it completely. And I think once you understand the history of dairy in the US, you can start to understand the history of so many other things. And it just took me back to this initial exploration of what real food was. I was still buying like Pop-Tarts and cereal and frozen meals and stuff for my kids, even though I was like, oh, well, if I just buy the organic brand, like I'm good to go.
No.
I had to like unlayer it, right? I had to
Uh-huh.
unlearn so much. And I had to really simplify it. Like real food is so much simpler than having to look through a list of 25 ingredients and like memorize what everything is. I don't do that. Like
No.
we are a whole foods family. That's not saying we don't ever eat chips or like trail mix or something, but in general, the majority of our food is whole food. So for us, like for so many other people, my sort of diving into the real food space was because my middle daughter, and I couldn't like give her this homemade raw milk formula without having to like fully embrace and understand raw dairy. So for a long time, when I would get our milk pickup, like I would drink a glass first and wait like 45 minutes. Like, am I going to be okay? So it's so funny to think about now, because I just have the most respect and trust for our farmers. But I had this real fear around raw dairy. And so I did make the leap though, giving our child a homemade formula, and she just thrived. Like her eczema went away. She had way better digestion. She started actually gaining weight because she was so little and tiny. And I just watched her thrive. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, what else can I learn? What else can I become a student of? And it has spiraled since then. She is going to be 7 next May. And so it's, been, I'd say, a solid 6 years on this journey, looking through the lens of real food. And it's honestly been the best experience ever.
That's amazing. I love that you took that leap with your daughter. Our journey with raw milk, because of my background, when we first got a cow, I pasteurized everything. I was like, well, at least it's raw, or I mean, at least it's from my farm. I know what went into my cow. I mean, I did feel better about that stuff. I was also pregnant at the time, so I was like, maybe I shouldn't jump into raw milk when I have the concerns of like listeria and stuff like that. So, but then my baby was born, and as soon as he switched off of formula, I had to stop breastfeeding because I got sick. And so we had him on formula for a while, and as soon as we switched him off of formula, he went right to raw milk. And it didn't even scare me at that point. But and I look back to like pregnant with him, like pasteurizing this giant vat of milk on my stove, and I'm like, I probably didn't need to. It was probably more dangerous trying to mess with that like giant pot of milk with my big old pregnant belly than it was to actually drink the milk.
I'm curious though, like how did you just heat it to a specific temperature?
Mhm.
And you didn't have to do it under pressure?
No, that's
Okay.
ultra pasteurized,
Yeah.
which we would just do, I guess, first level pasteurized. I don't really know because we weren't homogenizing it or anything. So I could still pasteurize and then get cream off the top.
Mhm.
So, it did make me feel a little better when we were learning how to do raw milk. And then my kids were milking a lot because, like I said, I was pregnant. And um, I don't think I'd ever go back on that decision just because I knew where I stood with it. But, and being a food safety specialist, all the onslaught of bad things that can happen. But now that I know all the great things that can happen from it too, like I said, I wouldn't change pasteurizing when I was pregnant, but we don't pasteurize now, and I'm really comfortable with that. So,
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, like my husband Joey pointed out, is that any real whole living food has potential to carry a pathogen. Like
mhm.
not just milk. It's that we're so used to that being pasteurized that the raw version of it freaks us out.
Yeah.
But no one would say like, oh, my orange juice at the store is pasteurized, so therefore I'm scared to eat a raw orange, right? We wouldn't use,
No.
even though every fluid in the grocery store is pasteurized because of the way that we have to ship things and
Hmm.
manufacture. So, for me, I'm like, anything has the potential to carry pathogen. Anything has the potential to be that host and let those bad bacteria breed. I mean, I have a good friend who's like a microbiologist, and she'll tell you all day, like, yeah, you don't want to you don't want to utilize raw milk at room temperature for this amount of time because then some of the bacteria growth, like you don't want that in your yogurt. So I
Hmm.
have respect for the microbes for sure. And I'm not saying that any dairy that has not undergone heat treatment is going to be great for us. So that's where the sourcing piece really comes into play. But yeah.
Well, honestly, when you're making like homemade yogurt, you hit that temperature that you need to hit to do the home pasteurization. So you're killing off that bacteria, and then you're actually inoculating it with another bacteria. So it's kind of, you're not hitting that ultra pasteurized that kills all the enzymes and everything, but you are still killing off some stuff in there. So,
Is necessary for that process because if you're going
mhm.
to sit at that warm temp, yeah, you don't want certain things breeding in there.
Right.
A cold glass of raw milk's much different than like a warm mixture of, pre-fermented yogurt. So yeah.
Yes. Much different. So yeah, we had a catalyst for us too. And I've talked to my audience about it before, but it was, my husband was diagnosed with liver disease.
Mm.
And so we had to go to an all natural diet. And that actually, we talk about it a lot, that, and you brought it up earlier, that the 90s kids where we just ate everything out of a box.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, when I was finishing up my Homestead curriculum, my husband was gone on a fire. The kids were trying to handle everything. We ate frozen burritos like for lunch every day, and I don't even feel bad about it. Because I mean, we were just it was a short period of time in our life, and we're moving on. I feel like what I feed my kids is considerably better than what I ate, because even though we were a big hunting family, so I didn't even like, I don't think I had store-bought beef till I was like 10 or something. But we'd have venison steaks, fried in white flour and oil, and have a box of mac and cheese with it. And I'm like, at what point was this better for me? Because it was venison. I don't feel that it was.
Yeah.
Versus what I do with my venison, like,
I,
but oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think something we talk about often is like when we're in seasons of survival, like there are definitely seasons of survival. Like for us, we had a house flood. And so we had to go our entire first floor and basement. And so we didn't have a kitchen for like 5 months. That's a season of survival,
Hmm.
right? Even though in that time, we had been buying milk from our farm, we had to just get by. And sometimes the mental stress of like, oh my gosh, am I eating all these processed seed oils because I'm eating out, for 3 meals a week or 5 meals, can do more harm. Like the stress on our body or the stress on that we put on ourselves can do as much harm as like, hey, having a chill, am I trusting God with this? Am I going to be okay, and recognize that this is a season of my life and that it doesn't have to be this perfectionist all the time. I'm eating perfect food. And again, that's where that food freedom piece comes into play. And then you can supplement and you can buy snacks and cold things that you can, chug your kombucha, or you can easily make ferments. You don't need a fridge or a kitchen for that. So I appreciate that time in your life too, because we've had seasons like that as well, for sure.
Yeah, and like we have this talk all the time about like the easy foods and like the culture that comes with that. And like I wish that we didn't have to make that choice, that we didn't have to have that catalyst, that it was just from day one, it was all about regulation and balance.
Mhm.
But sorry, I how do you guys handle like the commercialization of food with your kids?
So, we talk about food a lot. I think to your point, what you just said is like, I wish we didn't even have to have had a catalyst to go back to real food, is what
Mm-hmm.
it. And I agree. I think that's a byproduct of our society just wanting to cheapen our nourishment. Like, we just don't place a high value on the foods that we eat. We don't place a high value on taking time to eat together in community.
Well, I mean, like the government literally pays subsidies to grow more corn where we can have these like corn syrups. And I mean, it's an insane process that they're doing.
Right. And so it's those tidbits of information, right, that when you unearth, your eyes really start to open. And one of the best ways I love talking about this like industrial movement of our food is through documentaries, because they paint a great picture. And so like I've watched all the documentaries with my kids multiple times. Some of my favorites are
Yes,
sustainable.
please.
I love sustainable. I actually went and visited Spence Farm last year. I met Marty and Travis and then or Marty Travis, sorry, and his son Will. I knew I was saying those names wrong. From the farm. So that's sustainable is an awesome one. I love the Biggest Little Farm with Apricot Lanes out in California. That's a great show. To Which We Belong is good. That's a newer one. And then let's see, Kiss the Ground. That's a great documentary. Love that. Sacred Cow obviously is right up there. Love Diana Rogers. And yeah, there's just so many good documentaries that actually like take you into the factory, right, and then show you the opposite and take you to the farm. And it's just a much better way to have that conversation with my kids than, we also walk through the grocery store and they'll pick up a box of Little Debbie's and be like, oh my gosh, mom, doesn't this look amazing? And I'm like, yeah, how long ago do you think that was baked? Like, that's been sitting on this grocery store shelf. When we bake a cake at home and it like kind of tastes good for 3 days, maybe, and then like on the fourth day, it's kind of stale. Can you imagine baking something like a month ago? Right. So,
They're probably even longer than a month. It's probably a
oh,
month before it even left the factory.
and so I'm like, it's tricky, right? Because we have a house where I would say 80% of our foods are whole foods and or cooked from scratch, right? And we still have packaged foods. I still have like beef jerky upstairs that I didn't personally dehydrate. It sounds silly even saying that, but there is a little bit of guidance when we talk to our kids about real food, and it depends on their stages. So we have a 6-year-old who is obsessed with other foods, because she's like, oh my gosh, a bag of Cheetos, they kind of elevate in their head to this amazing thing. So if there's a betterish brand of like organic chip, like I might let them indulge. We're going to have a movie night this afternoon with my parents. We're making homemade sourdough pizzas, homemade chicken wings with like beautiful pastured chicken. And then I bought 2 bags of chips. Literally, that's it. But they're both organic. I don't know what the fried in, but like that's kind of the balance, right? Homemade most of the time, but then I'm letting them indulge in a packaged food because A, it's just fun, and B, we can't hold these crazy high standards when we look in the grocery store and it's like 80% of the food is packaged. So that's hard.
It is.
But like we have conversations about it. My 11-year-old is on a different path, right? So she kind of gets it a little bit better. She can comprehend, hey, that food that's highly processed came from a factory, didn't necessarily come from like a maker, like an artisan. And so that might be different from like stopping at a local bakery and picking up a pastry versus like grabbing about a box of Chex Mix off the store. Two totally different types of carb, two totally different types of food. And so it just, you have to meet your kids where they are, having the conversation. Even earlier today, I like visited a small co-op and did a little class for these 4 to 7-year-old kids, just talking about what food was and where it comes from.
I love
And
that.
yeah, I just think the more you can connect it back to the initial food producer or grower or rancher, then the more it starts to click. Like, hey, this didn't come from someone who grew this food and made it wholesomely for me. This came from a manufacturing plant that also took, a byproduct of this other food to make this, weird granola Chex Mix thing. And here we are, 3 months later. So it's a delicate balance, but I find that visual aids help. So those documentaries are wonderful. Going through curriculum, like your curriculum, the curriculum we've created, just
Hmm.
any sort of resource like that we can add some comprehensive context to. It's just really helpful.
Well, I mean, we're definitely hitting a new frontier with our curriculums that teaching kids the real skills that they aren't getting in schools. And even as homeschool parents, we want to teach them, but we weren't taught that.
Right.
So we don't
Yeah.
necessarily know where to start.
I think it's interesting that, we might be 3 or 4 generations removed from the farm, but I think something about our generation is just like really longing for that connection again. And so I don't have a living grandparent that worked on a farm. My great great grandfather, great, I can't remember. Someone up my dad's did. He grew tons of stuff. And my dad to this day says, like, I wish I would have spent more time with him to learn from him because he didn't. My dad
Mm-hmm.
became, a commercial airline pilot and served in the US Air Force. Like he still had a great
Oh,
legacy. But it
that's
was,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, but
My
it was
husband's a veteran, so.
amazing. See, I love that. So, there were these generational shifts, and now finally you and me are like, hey, wait a minute, our kids are showing up in this world completely confused with life skills and completely confused with the most basic of life skills, which is how to feed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have friends in their or late 20s, early 30s who still don't know how to cook.
Yeah.
Then what hope do their kids have? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a
Like,
concern.
I'm so thankful that my sons can cook.
Yeah.
And my
I,
well, and my daughter too, but she's my mini me and the only girl out of six. So
that's oh, she's gonna have the best time. I had 3 brothers. I have 3 brothers and I love it. Um, I always say like my husband's one of his best qualities might be the fact that he went to culinary school and can cook like better than I can.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah, it's an excellent skill. It's not just for women to learn. It's like everyone needs to learn how to nourish
Mm.
themselves.
My husband is always on board to cook. Like, I don't have to worry about that. He was a little iffy on like, you want me to follow a recipe? Like, I know how to make burgers and but now it doesn't bother him, especially because he understands this natural food movement that we're trying to achieve for ourselves and our kids. But I mean, like, I'm having I don't want to say like a problem, but I have 14-year-old twins. I have a boy and a girl, and we're struggling with them right now. It's a really interesting, like, they know, like, my 14-year-old daughter, she makes lunches for all her brothers on co-op day. And she's like, okay, mom, I did it with whole wheat bread and our turkey that we made, and I put tomatoes in there. And, she's like going through this whole, like, I made a perfect meal for everybody. And she understands everything that needs to go in it. And I'm like, what'd you pack? What did you eat at school today? She's like, Skittles. I'm like, and she's going through a growth spurt right now and like then actually lost like 10 or 15 pounds. And I'm like, this, like, her clothes are falling off of her. So I'm having to follow her around and be like, even if you don't want breakfast, you need to drink like a little protein shake or something. Whereas my 14-year-old son, he's struggling more like on my end, where I've always struggled with my weight on the high end. But he's like a carb junkie. Like, we had dinner the other night and he's like, yeah, I don't feel like having chili. I'll just eat cornbread. And I'm like, no. Like, the chili is made with our homegrown pork and our canned tomatoes. And I did buy beans, but you know.
That's how you have to say I did buy some store-bought beans. Just shows
Right.
how homesteady you are because I love that. Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Well, we always joke like that's how you flex.
Yeah, I did buy some beans at the store. I'm like suburbs. I always buy my beans. Um, I shared this on another podcast, but we sent our 11-year-old to summer camp this past summer. Just for like a week. It was church camp and it was hosted at a local college. And, for some unknown reason, they like gave these middle school students full access to the Coke machine. It was Pepsi actually. And so she's like, I had a Pepsi 3 with every meal, like 3 meals a day. And this child, like, we don't drink soda. if we have any carbonated beverage, it's literally kombucha from our local farm, an Olipop, which is like $2.50 a can, which is just outrageous. Or like there's like a Revive brand of that too. They're just like effervescent, I think they're supposed to be touted as probiotic juice, sparkling juices. Who knows? But they're not soda, right? There's no corn syrup. There's no like gross stuff. So this girl who never drinks soda went to summer camp and drank a Pepsi like at breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh my gosh.
And like she knows. And like I had the conversation before she went to camp. I was like, hey, I know you're gonna be really busy. You're gonna be running around. It's hot. It's really hot here. Make sure you're getting a good source of protein with every meal. Because, for her, carbs is like easy.
Yeah.
But it's like, you need protein. And she's like, no, I had this soda. And I was like, okay, well, how'd it make you feel? And she's like, well, I had a stomach ache so bad on day 2 that they almost called you. But then, like, they gave me a mint and it went away. And I'm like, it's probably because you're chugging soda.
Right.
Like, your body's just confused. And so it would be so easy for me to be like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to build this company around like people nourishing their families, and he goes and drinks Pepsi. Like, but here's the thing. I think that there's going to be a period of time. I know this actually, because this is how I was too as a kid, where we can teach our kids and set standards in our own home, but they have to figure it out themselves. There's gonna be decisions that they make where you're like, I literally raised you on raw milk and eggs and sourdough bread, and here you go eating the Skittles, right? Or eating whatever.
Oh, my 17-year-old right now, he works for an electrician's apprentice, makes good money. He comes home every day and opens his car door and like Mountain Dew cans fall out. And I'm like, water, like you need to drink some water. Like I get the Mountain Dew, I get the caffeine, I've been there, but water.
I know. And it's like one of those things, I feel like it's like, with your faith too. It's like they have to make their own. And so we can teach them, we can guide them, we can give them like, hey, if you want to eat this particular candy, like there's actually a better brand of that. Here, let's choose this one over this. Or, I don't know if there's a healthier version of Mountain Dew. I'm pretty sure.
Maybe kombucha.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, I think Zevia makes a Mountain Dew-esque flavor, but I don't love Zevias. Anyways, like we just have to hold it loosely, I think, as parents. It's hard, and it's going to be hard as my oldest daughter ages and my other kids grow into that too, because right now my youngest just eats everything I put on her plate. But it won't always be like that. The best thing we can do is just set the good example, nourish them when we do have the opportunities to, and then hope that like by the time they're 20 they come back around, right, and they start realizing that their bodies need this food. And and also like it's okay for us to indulge. Like I'm not looking for perfection for myself or for my kids, but I want to have a baseline of real food.
Yeah, we do the real food all week, and like about every other Friday. It started back when I was a single mom with the twins. Like I'd get paid every other Friday. We'd go get a movie and get a pizza and get soda. And that was like we'd go home and eat our pizza and drink our soda. And it's kind of that tradition has stuck around. And that's the only time we ever have soda in the house is like every other Friday night.
Yeah.
But
and
I know if I keep it in there more, they'll drink it all. So
yeah, we do similar things too. We have these movie nights, like tonight we're going to have one, but every year we do this big, on the 23rd of December, we watch Swiss Family Robinson. I don't know why we watch it, but it's his favorite. And we go all out. Like we're getting like hot chocolate bar. Like we set up this whole thing for like a hot chocolate bar. We have all these like chips and candy, but it's like the cleaner versions, right? So it's super expensive. And we're making homemade dips, and we're making all these amazing things. We're getting special drinks, and the girls, like, we set up a party basically just for our family of 5, which is hilarious.
Oh, fun.
It's like they know that like it's just true food is part of our family tradition. And so we have chosen to make that night a particular indulgence because it's just really fun. It's like 2 days before Christmas, and we love it, and the kids love it, and every year they know it gets a little bit bigger, and it's a good time. I would never trade that for any amount of like carrot sticks and celery. To me, that's not yeah. So
we kind of do one, like the kids don't love working in the yard. I don't think we really love working in the yard. So we do this, we have a big patio and a big grassy lawn. And so we do this thing where we take the kids outside, and all day long they have to work for an hour, play for an hour, and that's their thing. But I'm making tacos in the crock pot out on the patio the whole time. And then when we're done, we have this big taco bar, and we make like, I say mixed drinks, but we don't drink, but and obviously I'm not giving my kids mixed drinks. But we do like, like 7-Up and lemonade and like, make these like fizzy fun drinks, and the kids play, I don't even know, whatever, racquetball or something in the grass, I guess it's not racquetball in the grass, it's badminton.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's it. That's so
And
fun.
they look forward to it. Like, are we gonna have, like a taco bar on the patio? And I'm like, if my lawn gets done.
Work for it. Yeah. I think that's awesome.
So, um, yeah, let me see here. So we're actually, with our kids, their big one right now is they get excited for everything that we can say that we make ourselves.
Hmm.
So like, especially like my 5-year-old, he sits down, what all of this came from our farm. So, and he's my tester for my younger curriculum, and have him go through that. I'm actually doing it with his co-op this next spring.
So fun.
Yeah, a group of 5 to 7-year-olds. So I'm looking forward to that one, kind of test it out, see how they like it with a bigger group, not because everyone always goes, how do you teach it? But I'm like, I don't know, because I only taught it to one kid. But so what we're working on is the nutrient dense foods. Is, we, like I was kind of saying, like I bought the beans, but like, we'll do like nachos for dinner. And the only thing in there that's, store bought and not good are the chips. And, that's what we work on is, like we do. So, I mean, we do have some grass fed beef, but our big one is pork because we're pig farmers.
Mm.
So I use pork for my tacos and chili and everything if I don't have beef or elk or something, because those are all seasonal, but pigs are not. But how do you teach your kids about like the nutrient dense versus the non-nutrient dense?
Yeah, it's I love that paradigm so much better than the food pyramid because even to
Hmm.
go up, I visited. I was like, "Does anyone know what the food pyramid is?" And no one said yes. I was like, "Thank you," because I hate it. Like that's awful food pyramid. Um, this whole trend, and that's really why I wrote the curriculum, right? Is because when I was looking to teach my kids about this and not just me hold up an apple and a steak, but like have a textbook they could work through, there was just nothing out there. Like it was all regurgitating what the USDA has to say, which unfortunately, I just don't think people are paying attention. I think if
Yep.
people knew USDA was upholding highly refined seed oils in replace of natural traditional fats, they would be appalled.
Yeah.
I think if they heard that they were telling people to reduce their amount of red meat consumption and increase things like plant-based meats, tofu, milk alternatives, deeming them the exact same as real dairy, I think they would be concerned. I don't need to be a dietitian or a nutritionist to tell you that plant-based milks are not a nutritional equivalent. They're just not. And they should never have been in that same category. We should have
No.
been teas and coconut. I mean, coconut's a little bit different because it's like more of a whole food, but soy milk like should be a soy tea, if anything. Like it's not a milk.
Right?
And
No.
we have to get away from this verbiage because it confuses the consumer into thinking that it's a good swap when it's not. And so, because I'm sort of battling the USDA's food guidelines because we just don't believe in that. Like as a hunting family, for you to tell us to reduce our amount of red meat, we live on venison. Like, what do you mean
Mhm.
reduce red meat? Then that would make us more reliant on the industrial food system. That's the only thing that choice would do. It would just mean that we can no longer source our own meat and that we'd have to be sourcing meat from some manufacturer, some processing plant that's, or some even worse, patented food item that is made from plants that's supposed to be an adequate source of protein. So,
Well, and like I was just, while you were talking, I was looking it up on my phone because I saw on Facebook or something this morning that somebody was saying that the FDA had approved the lab grown meat. And I was like, before I say anything, I want to look it up and see if I actually see it from I mean, I see it from CNN. So, but I mean, it's out there that they have actually approved the lab grown meat. And I find that appalling.
It's that's a great word for it. It's truly appalling because we are now in a place where we are so confused as consumers what the heck we're eating, that if we don't quickly educate ourselves in this next generation, I tell people all the time, it will cripple them. This anti-meat dogma that's happening right now
Yes.
the next generation. And I get a lot of heat for being so loud and vocal about animal source foods, but it's because they are the nutrient dense foods.
Oh,
And
get louder.
yeah, I know. I'm like, I'm
I
I'm such
stand behind you, like cheering you on.
a big rancher. You should, yeah. Because here's the thing, like, and I think sometimes people misinterpret the message, right? And they think like we don't eat vegetables. Please don't hear me say that because we absolutely do. We eat
Right.
vegetables, right? Um, we want to make sure they're organically grown as much as possible and we're eating them in season as much as possible. But we cannot pretend that humans are not in need of animal source foods. And it's not just like, oh, you have to eat meat. It's like, no, I want you drinking milk. I want you consuming real butter, not this like country crock, can't believe
Mm-hmm.
real cream. Like, I'm not afraid of cream. I love eggs. Like, let's stop trying to denature and refine everything and separate egg yolks from egg whites. Let's just eat the whole egg.
Right.
And it goes even deeper to say Americans just don't have a good understanding of what it means to consume nose to tail. We're freaked out if it's not a muscle meat.
Mm-hmm.
And people know that the meat they're eating is muscle fiber. Like, I don't think adults know that. And
Yeah.
so it's like when you understand that, hey, a whole animal has, yeah, muscle fibers, but also organs that we can utilize, bones and connective tissue and skin. Like, why are we buying boneless, skinless chicken breasts at the store?
Right.
So, I'm like, that's
I
kind of
mean,
what
we skin our own raised chickens just because it's easier and we don't have a plucker, but it has nothing to do with the not wanting to eat the skin.
I know, because this crispy skin is so good, right? And so
Right.
for us, whenever I'm having these conversations with my kids, I would rather approach it through a lens of, hey, these are the foods that are most nutrient dense, meaning, so let's break that down. What does that mean? It means for the smallest amount of food, it packs the most punch. We have the most vitamins, minerals, fats, proteins, whatever in this amount of food. So I can eat, a 4 ounce piece of steak and get a ton of stuff versus like 4 bowls of broccoli, right? So I wouldn't
Mhm.
consider broccoli nutrient dense. Now, is broccoli so important because it can be good plant fiber and delicious if you roast it and blah blah blah? Yes, of course. But unfortunately, we have to recognize as parents that it's not just the battle of combating junk food and what we deem as real food that we have with our kids. It's the
Mhm.
battle of combating this plant forward or plant only narrative in
Mhm.
society. And so that is why we stand really firm with understanding that animal source foods are the most nutrient dense foods. Okay. Like things like liver, egg yolks, butter, and raw whole milk are going to be so nourishing for you that it doesn't even compare to your kale or your chia seeds or whatever you grew up thinking was, a healthy superfood.
Right.
And because I fell into that trap, right? I was no fat for a long time. I ate anything that was like low fat, or I would just eat salads all day, or, you
Well, and
know,
I had the exact opposite problem. I've always struggled with being heavy, and it's because I was told like, either lettuce or everything else.
yeah.
Well,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, lettuce is gross. I mean, I love a salad now as an adult, but as a teenager, I was like, why is the only way to be happy is, or I associated happy with then, but
Mhm.
the only way to be happy is to only eat lettuce. No, I mean, that's not the whole story. That's not the whole picture. And I still struggle with my weight, but I don't associate happy and thin anymore.
Good. I think on that piece, it's like it pains me to recall, but like in my eating disorder treatment, the goal was not, hey, let's educate you around your food. It was like, hey, let's get you comfortable eating your whole plate. So like every single meal, we would have a timer. And once we got our plate, the timer would start. If we finished our food in the first 15 minutes of the 30-minute stretch, then we would be rewarded by getting to being allowed to drink a glass of tea. If we had a specific code on our band, we could also have a tablespoon of honey in our tea. It was like so regimented, right? And then so there's one thing. First of all, my plate was like a bagel, which definitely wasn't organic or scratch made sourdough. Like it was a highly refined carb. A thing of like Philadelphia cream cheese, which like again, not organic, probably had some fillers and some gums and preservatives in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like probably a piece of turkey bacon or something like lower fat, right? Because again, they're following the USDA food guidelines. And it's like, oh, my dream is to open like a nourishing women's like facility where I could actually teach people about real food, but I don't have any of the accreditation behind my name. Like I'm not a registered dietitian. So maybe I need to partner with someone who is. But
That's a really beautiful goal. I mean,
oh, I would love to do that because here's
like
the issue.
be the idea behind it. Like,
Yeah, we're getting there. So I mean, we'll get there at some point, I hope. But it's like for your example, and I believe that too, right? The salads are the only thing. I have to eat veggies, I have to be really low carb. I have to burn off every calorie I eat. And if I quote indulge in a food that is outside of that, then I feel the urge to like combat that by working out or by physically purging that food, right? So horribly disordered way of thinking. And
yeah.
I learned through honestly like the Weston A. Price Foundation and others is some of the most nutrient dense are nourishing and satiating, and they're actually the foods that we can eat to maintain a healthy weight. Like now I eat so much butter and cream and egg yolks and meat, and yes, of course I eat vegetables, but like I enjoy sourdough baked goods. I'm not afraid of wheat. I'm not afraid of any of my other in the past like fear foods, because I the lines of like, is this traditionally prepared? Is this wholesome? Is it grown in a way that honors like the ecosystem and the biology of the environment, or was it grown in a way that was doused with agrochemicals?
Sorry, I guess I hit my hour on the no
Oh,
on the like focus.
so yeah, the combating that exact model of thinking of, hey, I have to eat vegetables to be healthy, to save myself and to save the planet, is exactly kind of what we've set out to do. And I think there's a way to eat really nourishing, amazing foods, and they can include things that, at one point we might have been scared to eat. I tell people all the time that they're like, what do my kids snack on? I'm like, there's a number of things, but like, please don't be scared of whipped cream if it's made with beautiful raw cream, a little bit of maple extract. Like that with some berries is a kid-friendly treat that your kids will for sure eat. And
It's
it's
a
not
mom-friendly treat.
a mom-friendly treat. And it's not like you're spraying it out of a can, but again, because we have so many counterparts that are these hyper processed foods, we tend to think like, oh, whipped cream, because it can come in a can, it's unhealthy. Or oh, a cheeseburger, because I can buy a version of that at the drive-through, then they're junk food. Not to me. I love burgers. I will
Oh
eat a
yeah.
burger. I think it's a really nourishing food. So yeah.
It's about what you have with it. I mean, we don't eliminate anything from the house. I
Yeah.
mean, except for Takis. I don't allow Takis.
Those things are spicy.
They are, and I have two kids with like stomach issues, and they're the two that love them. So they like, and they're teenagers, so they go to town together and buy Takis and then come home and whine about their stomachs. And I'm like, I don't care. Like you made that choice and you're not a baby, so.
It's true.
But so yeah, I love how you mentioned it a bit back that there was nothing out there to teach your kids, and so you created it. Like, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of my story too, but I want to hear yours.
I know. When I was reading on your website, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my counterpart. Like she did exactly what I did too. I don't know when you started yours, but mine, I started writing it back in, I think, 2019. I think I got my logo created in 2018. But I didn't launch until 2021. So we're only like a year and a half old.
Yeah, that's
And
about where we're at as
yeah,
far
and
as launch date.
cool. Yeah, and I'm glad I actually put it off a year because I was going to launch in April 2020, and then my homeschool convention, the one that happens locally in Cincinnati, which is supposedly the biggest one in the United States.
Oh, I might be there this year.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge, but in April of 2020, it got shut down. They kept
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, we're gonna meet anyways. This is gonna be fine," and obviously that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So imagine April 2020, which I'm honestly, in hindsight, so thankful I waited an extra year, because I just think everyone's mental capacity was maxed out.
Yeah.
It was like this new thing, and they didn't ever. And
And
then like
by 21, they're like, we know what we want to do. Like, how do we do it?
exactly. And the other beautiful thing was, like, a lot of people rushed to homeschooling, or they did this virtual school, which, by the way, is not homeschooling. And I
No.
think we differentiate ourselves. Like, if parents of public schoolers suffered through a year where their teachers tried to teach via Zoom or something like that, and they were like, if this is homeschooling, I'm out. All the OG homeschoolers like you and me need to be like, hey, that is not homeschool. That's
Right.
the worst of public school and the worst of your at-home environment, and meshing them together. So
Mm-hmm.
I really am thankful for that extra year that kind of weeded through the people that weren't really going to homeschool long term. And also, like, now people are finally starting to wake up to, like, hey, my food does matter. Hey, my not just my food matters for my health, but like my food choices matter for my neighbor's health, for my community, for the land on which my food is grown. And I think we're
Mm-hmm.
just starting to, like, we're just a small piece of this real food movement, but the real food movement itself is gaining momentum. So for me, I
Well, I think we
literally
kind of have the honor of bringing the kids into it in a different way.
totally, and I was surprised that nothing was out there.
Yeah,
I was
there's nothing. Well, now there is.
Now we've got the homesteading worlds and the nutrition real food worlds covered, and I'm so thankful that, so many other parents have seen that need for their own home too. Because at first I was like, I don't know if anyone else needs this but me, but if I just create this for my daughter, like, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So it literally just looked like me, writing on a piece of paper, like a course outline. Like, okay, what would I write in here? What would I put in here? How would I even start this conversation? How do we unlearn? So the very first lesson in the original workbook is called Forgetting the Pyramid, because I'm just like,
Ooh,
let's
I
get it out of
love
here.
it. I think I
And
need to like order this for my kiddos right now.
yeah, and I'll ship some to you. So
Okay.
yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts too on it. But I wanted it to be all encompassing in terms of, like, just understanding what food is and where it comes from. I also wanted it to be really aesthetically pleasing. So, like, I did hire a brand designer to, like, do a logo for me. And then I had her lay out the first 5 lessons. And then from there, I took it and kind of designed the rest. And then every resource from then I've created on my own. But for our early elementary product that we launched last December, I hired a watercolor artist, and she
Oh,
like
nice.
hand the art that's in that. And then our most recent product, I hired like our city's best food photographer, because I just want our products to be beautiful. I want them
Right?
to
I kind of went through the same thing. I had a little bit of like imposter syndrome. Like, mine isn't beautifully painted like all these other ones I see. And then I was like, no, you made yours the way you did because you wanted like exact pictures of what some of these things actually look like.
yeah, and that's necessary. And you can't let beauty get in the way of function. And so
Well, and then I do feel like mine turned out really beautiful in a different way.
totally. And so, yeah, it was like 2.5 years of writing the book. And that time, like, I got pregnant and then had our youngest daughter in May of 2020. And so,
Oof.
you know, that happened. Yeah, it was wild timing. And then somewhere in that time, Sally Fallon Morell, the founder and president of the Weston A. Price Foundation, got a hold of the book and like reviewed it for me, and
Nice.
gave feedback, and like wrote notes in the margins. I still have the copy, like, I'm gonna keep it forever. But
Right?
she gave her input in it on it, and I asked other homeschool parents, and I talked to other people, and it's so nerve-wracking launching something into the world when you're like, I don't really know what kind of credentials someone might need to write this, but like, I feel like I don't have them. Um, And, I had people ask me like, well, you don't have a medical degree. How can you talk about food? And then I had to stop and remind myself that having a medical degree doesn't mean you know anything outside of pharmaceuticals necessarily. You don't
Yeah.
have to know nutrition to be a practicing MD. I'm pretty sure they get 1 hour of nutritional counseling.
Right. Well,
So
I mean, I would think people would be more concerned about being a nutritionalist, but even at this point, I feel like there's a lot of really great nutritionalists out there. I don't want to discredit them, but I feel like with this movement, it's more somebody who's digging past all that.
exactly. And so for a while I was like, okay, well, I'm not a dietitian. And then I realized, well, when I used to see a dietitian, she would drink a diet Mountain Dew at every session and weighed
Yeah.
85 pounds. So it's like you can be a dietitian and still espouse highly processed refined foods, or you can be a real food dietitian and blow past all that. But dietitians, their whole goal is to counsel one-on-one. Okay, so like, yes, I'm never going to walk into a hospital and give recommendations on what someone puts in their feeding tube because I'm not a registered dietitian.
Right.
But I do have a master's degree in communication, and I do have some design background, and I definitely have some writing background. So if all I need to do is write a resource, cite where I'm getting my information, and design it to be beautiful, I can do that. And so that's exactly what I did.
Right.
So and that's given me so much freedom to be like, hey, I'm not the researcher here. I'm the one that's just compiling this information so that you don't have to go write this curriculum for your own kid. And honestly, that's how our meal plans have come into play too. It's like, hey, I'm just creating these recipes, which, anyone can write a recipe, and developing these things that we're just mirroring and mimicking in our own home. So
Well, I
yeah,
think it's the spin that you put on recipes because like you're going for the whole food movement where like the recipes I put on my site are a lot of times how you can make nutritious meals when you have a busy family.
Totally. Yeah. And I think everyone's perspective is needed in that space too. And so, I resonate with you putting something into the world after you're like, wait, I need to teach my kids this, but there's nothing available. And so, you and I stepped up and we did it. And
I love it.
I love it too. It gives me so much life and so much hope. And it's been really freeing for me to step into a space that I know needed. Like I don't take my past journey with food for granted. I'm thankful I walked through that experience because it colors how I see food and raising daughters today. And so it's like, what a gift from God that I can take my old experience and put light on it now and have it be something that's actually beneficial to the world. So yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that because that's, you know, each time now that I think of something that I want to teach my kids, my brain immediately goes to, I should write a curriculum about that. And then, my husband melts down and runs away. And
Yeah.
so, I keep joking that he says I can only write one book this year. So I'm only going to write two. But
Yeah. The first year we launched, I think I put out like 3 pieces of new material. Like I was releasing something new almost every 3 or 4 months. And it was really fun, but really exhausting. And then this year we haven't really launched a legitimate product. I say that we launched a coloring book in the beginning of the year, but it was a very small project compared to like writing a full meal plan or a full curriculum. And we're coming up on our first legitimate product launch next week. So I don't know when this podcast, but
it's going to line up really well because I was planning on releasing it Tuesday. So
yeah, so we're going to launch our What's for Breakfast resource on Monday. And yeah, I mean, being a content creator, how difficult and challenging that is, and what a monumental amount of work it is leading up to your launch. So
yeah, I mean, you have to do all the behind, you have to be the creator and the marketer, and it's exhausting trying to balance the two. So no, I get you 100%. So on that note, you are releasing your What's for Breakfast. You want to tell us a little bit about it and tell us what you have for our listeners?
Yeah, so the What's for Breakfast, we have a resource also called What's for Dinner, which is 6 weeks worth of nightly meals. So it's 42 dinners, and it kind of flows from one to the next. And we give you weekly shopping lists. So you buy for the week and then you cook all your dinners based off my cooking instructions. And, it's really designed to say, hey, you cook a whole chicken on Monday and then you boil the stock on Tuesday and then you use the stock in the rice on Wednesday, that type of thing, to really stretch your ingredients.
Good.
But then after I released that, people were like, but what do I do about breakfast? And I hesitated for a long time. I was like, guys, I don't know. Like, I don't want to write another meal plan because it's just a lot of work. And then I was finally like, you know what? We got to have a what's for breakfast. And so for this one, it's more so because I don't think people need 6 weeks of breakfast ideas. I think they need staple recipes where they can learn how to utilize what's already on hand. So I basically formulated a bunch of recipes out of just using staples that you'd have. So flour, eggs, butter, milk, a seasonal vegetable or a seasonal fruit that you're already buying for another meal. How can we utilize these ingredients you already have on hand? Also to train you to keep a stocked fridge and pantry. And then make nourishing meals that center around animal source protein. Obviously, that's huge for us. Having a good carbohydrate in the morning, having good fats. And then also put it into that like weekly rhythm of, hey, we tell you this is kind of the shorter meal prep. So you can use these from Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, you can enjoy these sort of like longer 30-ish minute meal preps. So it's half cookbook, half meal plan, honestly. But it's just got everything in there. It's got like our coffee consumption, our teas that we love, the way that we conscientiously source our coffee and the ways that we drink it not on an empty stomach in the morning, and we've got like our staple ingredients and where we source those and why we keep them on hand. And so it's just supposed to be an all-encompassing book to say, hey, you need breakfast ideas, grab this book. You can cook nourishing real food. And honestly, like my mission behind it was to take back the family breakfast table because I'm so sick of us being sold so short, like cereal and pastries and toaster cereals. Like,
yes.
And I just think like us as humans, we thrive so much better if we put real food into our bodies first thing in the morning than if we are rushing down a bowl of cereal or something else, and I'm not opposed to cereal. I use it as a snack every now and then, but it's just one of those foods where I'm like, I just love it so much. So I try not to keep it on hand, but a bowl of organic cereal and some raw milk is an occasional treat for me. I just don't consume it for breakfast. So that's the thing. Like, why have our breakfast turned to what looks more like dessert? And why are we not nourishing ourselves? Why do we lie to ourselves and say that breakfast, 1/3 of our meals of the day, doesn't deserve our time in the kitchen? I don't believe that's true. So that's what's for breakfast. And I did put a discount code on our website for any of our resources. So any of the children's nutrition curriculum, the what's for dinner, we have a coloring book, and the what's for breakfast, you can get 15% off by just using the discount code Homestead. You just have to type that in at checkout. You should get 15% off.
Great. And I'll put that in the show notes for everyone. Yeah, I'm so excited because I hate sweet stuff for breakfast.
Yeah.
Except for yogurt. I do like yogurt for breakfast. So with fruit in it. But that's different than like a Pop-Tart. So
totally. And so one of the breakfast ideas is yogurt, but we give you a really simple homemade granola. And there's a sourdough fermented version of the granola if you want to do that. And so yeah, there's savory items, there's some sweet items. It's all supposed to be really balanced on a macronutrient level. And it's just trying to get people re-inspired when it comes to their morning meals.
That's great. So we're starting to wrap up now, but I have something that I ask all of my guests, and that's, what does keep growing mean to you?
I love that you asked this to your guests, because on our podcast, the final question we ask is, what are you learning today? And to me, those are the questions, right? What does keep growing mean to you? What are you learning today? For me, it's like constantly positioning myself as a lifelong learner. I was even just talking to my husband like the other night where I was expressing to him that I have this struggle where I feel like I can be really self-disciplined in one area, but I have a hard time when crossing over. So for example, I'm about to launch this book. I've put in probably 35 hours this week working, in my house. I don't have childcare, so my kids are around too, right? And I'm like, I'm dedicated and I'm disciplined, but my workout has fallen. Like I haven't gotten daily movement in. And, my food is always pretty much the same, but sometimes it's like the kids' school is like, oh, well, I need to block out these hours. And sometimes I'm either super diligent with the kids' school, or I'm super diligent with homework, or I'm super diligent with my workout schedule. And it's like, why can I not somehow be disciplined in more than one area at one time? Like, why am I so compartmentalized? And he's like, you got to set specific goals. Right now, your specific goal is to launch this new resource. So that's why you're working so hard on it. You have to set specific goals. And so like, that's a perfect example of I'm constantly analyzing how my week is going, how I'm feeling, how my kids are feeling, what their emotional needs are. I'm an 11-year-old daughter. Like, emotional needs run high in my house, as you know.
Yes.
So it's like constantly checking in and calibrating to what we're just observing is me trying to have like a forward center of mass, trying to constantly learn and push myself. And it's both rewarding and exhausting, but I feel like we should feel spent to some degree at the end of our days, like in a good way. Like we should feel a good sense of like, wow, I worked from before the sun rose till after the sun set, and that's not like just business work. That's like, I'm doing dishes, I'm cooking for my family, I'm having a conversation with my daughter, it's any of that is
that well-rounded accomplishment.
Totally. And so it's like, that's what it feels like for me, is constantly reassessing. And I'm in that season right now of like, what else do I need to optimize here? What else do I need to recalibrate so that it makes more sense for myself and my whole family? Because I'm in charge of a lot. I'm in charge of homeschooling my kids. I'm in charge of running my household. I'm in charge of running my company. And I'm in charge of making sure my body is equipped to do the work I'm called to do. And so that's a lot if you put that all on paper, right?
It really is, but I understand where you're coming from. It's finding that balance that you feel good about every aspect of your day at the end of the day. Because I feel that a lot. Like, when I'm writing, I am 100% in it, and I get done at the end of the day and I'm like, I didn't mark anything off my list today. And my husband's like, but you wrote, 3 chapters. And I'm like, that's not enough for me, because I didn't meet the needs of everybody. And I could have still been productive after writing 2 chapters, and, kind of that I've definitely respect that goal.
Yeah. And I even think like, it's okay for us in certain seasons for one of our responsibilities to take precedence. Like if you're about to launch a product, or you're like, I have a deadline, I have to finish writing this book, I think that's okay. The piece where I'm also trying to stretch myself in is like, hey, I can't completely fall off on I can't lose sight of my other things. And that's what I do, is I completely lose sight of like, and we have a home gym. Like I can just go in the gym. It's on the other side of this wall here, and I could just lift basic weights. I don't need to like run 5 miles. I just need to do a little bit of weight training, build some muscle. It would take
I have a bike with a desk on it right behind me. So
yeah, it's like, we're so close. We're right there. But for me, it's just going to be, and I'm saying this in the future tense because I haven't accomplished this yet. But for me, my goal for myself and what I want to grow into, to answer your question, is like, I want to get better at not losing sight of my other goals, just because I'm working really hard and really disciplined in one of them. And so my husband's a great example of that. I don't know how he does it, but I'm hoping he'll teach me along the way. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on today and talking about this so important subject in our world right now. And I hope that we can reconnect again soon.
Yeah, I'm so happy I have your curriculum in our house. I'm going to work through it with our girls. And I'm thankful for your work. Thank you for this podcast. Thanks for having me on. And thank you for creating the resources that you saw a need for. And just keep cranking it out. I can't wait to see what 2 books you write next year.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for joining me today at the Homestead Education, and I hope that I have given you something to think about this week. To help others find me, please comment and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. You can also follow me on Facebook at the Homestead Education and Instagram at Homestead_education. Do you have questions that you would like answered, or just want to say hi? Please email me at hello@thehomesteadeducation.com. Until next time, keep growing.